Welcome everyone to today's webinar, which is called Just Do It, Sharing the Principles with a Leadership Team. And I'm excited to be hosting this event with Cheryl Bond and Kim Kaase. And basically they're going to talk about their experiences, I think a specific experience of working with a leadership team, and how Cheryl helped mentor Kim in this. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Cheryl to just introduce herself a little bit and talk about talk a little more about what we're going to talk about. So take it away, Cheryl.
Great. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I've been around the three principles for quite some time. I learned back in 1999 when I was an internal consultant at BAE Systems. I worked there for 15 years, and working with leadership teams and teaching the principles was really part of my everyday job. So I was fortunate enough to work with just about all of the first line practitioners, as well as with Sydney Banks. And but I just came to coaching. It's interesting, Kim, we have just the opposite in terms of our backgrounds. I had a ton of work with leadership teams and working in business, but it wasn't until I started my own business in 2012 that I started to do any coaching. So I was sort of new on the coaching front, but all the stuff working with leadership teams and designing programs and teaching to groups was pretty much old hat for me. So I came across Kim and we decided to work together. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and then sort of give you some background about the opportunity that she had, and then how we worked together virtually to lead to what was a really, really successful leadership team offsite. So take it away, Kim.
Great. Thanks, Jill, and thanks, Cheryl. And thanks for everybody for being here. I see faces that I know and some that I don't, and some names that I know as well. And I appreciate you guys coming to listen to what we have to say today, and hopefully shine a light on this kind of mysterious process. So my background, just a little bit about my background. I worked a little over 20 years in a corporate field here in the U.S. and became a coach full-time in 2012, and had been doing some coaching part-time up until that point. During my time in corporate, I had developed myself as a leader and also developed other leadership team members, along with developing staff within the company that I worked for. And so I had some sort of unofficial leadership development experience, but not a lot in terms of direct experience, like as a consultant, like Cheryl was. So I came across the principles about a year and a half into my coaching career. So that was in 2013 at some point. And I really thought I would be doing a lot of leadership team development in my coaching job. And then that work just kind of sporadically came to me. It didn't come as fast as I thought it would. The coaching side of my business was much more robust. And so that kind of leads up to the point where I got this opportunity. And the opportunity that we're going to talk to you guys about today actually came to me. I did the leadership retreat in September 2016, so just a few months ago. But the first time I heard about this opportunity was actually about a year before that. So I'm sharing that with you guys just to say that sometimes these take a little while to develop. And what happened, how I got into the opportunity, was a client of mine who'd done some coaching work with me. She's also a consultant. She does a lot of consulting around business development. She tells professional services firms, she really helps them get their staff ready to go and do more effective business development. And she was working with a client in her city, and she saw that they were having some problems. You know, this is a little over a year ago, and she would see that like how they ran meetings was really not very effective. and that they wouldn't get decisions made very well. But the client kept asking for, like, they didn't necessarily see those things as problems. What they kept asking her for was like strategic planning type work. Okay. And so she called me and said, like, is this something you can do? Like, I had done that with a company she had worked for in the past. And I said, you know, again, with my principles understanding that evolved over the years, I said, well, yeah, I can definitely help with strategic planning. But with what you're describing here, I said, I don't think that's really what they need right now. Like, we could do a strategic plan, but if this team is not in a good mindset place to be able to act on the strategic plan, then it's going to be kind of a waste of their money. So I said, I would really, you know, respectfully, I would say I would want to do some other work first around, you know, getting the trust level up and getting them communicating better. And then that's going to put them in a lot better place to have a good strategic plan, to be able to act on that. And so she really considered what I said, but in the end, they hired another consultant to do a strategic plan. And so, and I was kind of disappointed at the time, because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get to do some more of this leadership work that I really want to do. And I didn't get to do that. But fast forward about 9 months. Okay, so they did the strategic planning work, and much like I predicted, not to say I told you so, but I did predict that they really couldn't get the most out of the strategic plan, right? They continued to have really ineffective meetings. They continued to have a very low level of trust on the team. They had a really hard time making decisions. And so by the time they called me the second kind of round of meetings, like they were desperate and they were ready to listen to me. So that's the point. I got hired to do this. I told them really, I kind of got a sense that I wanted to do a 2-day retreat with them. And then this was in May of 2016. And then at that point I thought, well, gosh, how am I going to do that exactly? Like, I hadn't taught the principles to a group. I hadn't considered a group's objectives and the principles kind of in the same place. And that's actually when I came across Cheryl as a person having done this work for quite a long time inside of an organization. That's what I thought, gosh, I could probably do this on my own. Like, I felt confident enough to do it, but I thought, wow, I wonder what it would be like to have someone like Cheryl consult with me on this, to sort of guide me and have me learn some things that I don't know. Like, that could really, I felt like that would really make the experience for the client even better. And so that's how we came to work together. Cheryl, do you have anything else you wanted to say about that? I went on there for a bit, but
yeah. So I met Kim back in July of 2016 when I worked with a couple of other gals who were 3 principles practitioners with a lot of business experience in their own personal backgrounds, who somehow, in my mind, they didn't have the confidence that I was surprised they didn't have. So I did a weekend retreat with them, and that's how Kim and I met. And one of the things so a couple of things struck me about Kim, and it was why I really wanted to work with her. First of all, she had a business background. She had a very impressive business resume. So she knew business. She'd worked with business people. She'd had a consulting background in terms of her coaching. So all the pieces were there. It really made me think about the just do it in terms of just getting out there and teaching and working with the team instead of one-on-one. She had a great confidence and just a great feel. Any of you who know her know how easy it is to connect with her, and she has just a great presence. And I knew she'd be great with any team that she was working with. But it's funny that we use the G word here, the grounding word. because I used to be the first one to roll my eyes when somebody talked about grounding and the principles. And yet, you know, and Kim will speak to this as she talks about how things unfolded. It really is the foundation, and there's really no substitute in terms of tips or techniques or a format or anything that somebody can tell you that can take the place of just having really solid grounding. Yes, you need to have a plan. I have sort of a set of guidelines that I use when I'm working with a team that I shared with Kim, but there's no substitute for really having that deep understanding for yourself about how life really works and understanding the principles. And she has that in spades, and I think that it was a huge contributor to her success.
Well, thanks for that. And I'll say too, I want to talk a little bit about the work Cheryl and I did prior to us developing this program for my client. And I want to go back to the retreat for just a minute. So yeah, we were 3 business people that hired Cheryl to do this retreat, and we all had the same desire, to go and work with business groups and leadership groups. And we had the background, and then we had the grounding and the principles, but like I kept saying, I don't know, I don't quite understand how to build the bridge. And there was a and clearly Cheryl had that experience. Like she'd really, this wasn't her first or second or third rodeo. Like she really did this work as her core business for many, many years. And the question that she offered up to us as we were giving her examples of what do groups want to hear about? Like if we were going to design talks, for instance, to go do for business groups, like what do people want to hear about? Like, what are they asking about? What are they having problems with? So we talked about things like, the golden handcuffs in business, people who feel like they can't leave their job because it's just too lucrative. Or we talked about the millennials. People talk about millennials a lot and what a challenge that is to manage them. And I don't know, we came up with a list of 5 or 10 different topics that we thought business groups would really be interested in, like we get asked about. And Cheryl offered up this one question that I think all of us still to this day keep going back to, which is when we think about millennials, or we think about the golden handcuffs, or we think about, deadlines. Her question to us was in terms of building the bridge is, well, what does thought have to do with that? It was such, like in its simplicity, that question changed everything for all of us, because we could figure out just that one aspect of the principles, right? Like just that one aspect of thought, like what does thought have to do with people feeling trapped by the whole golden handcuffs? Like that could start to really build that bridge between a better understanding of the way life works and what the person's problem was. So that really, I wanted to bring that question up because again, it sounds simple, but it's kind of deceptively simple. And it's something that, I don't know, that's a gift that keeps on giving to me in terms of sort of where our work, the jumping off point, I guess, from where we were.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think Kim did a really good job with, and I'll have her talk to you about it a little bit. And it's a point that I make in my own work, is that you can't do enough intake. Like the people who are like, we don't have time for this, we want this program or that program, or I want this or I want that. If you just jump in and start delivering a program or giving people what they're telling you they want. I certainly had enough epic fails doing that when I started out, that you will get back every minute you spend talking to all the participants one-on-one, getting a sense of what the work looks like to them, getting a sense of what their challenges look like, getting a feel for who kind of gets this, who's open, who's not. and what are you going to do about it? Because there's a lot of different pitfalls that you can hit in that intake phase that you're going to have some decisions to make. And Kim certainly hit a couple, and we talked through what to do about it. So do you want to talk? Is that a good transition? Do you want to talk a little bit about intake and what you found out?
Yeah, that would be great. So like I said at the beginning, I got hired to do this, like to do a specific retreat, basically, without any input from Cheryl. Like I just sort of guessed at what I was going to be doing, to be honest. I had a feel for it, don't get me wrong, but it was my best guess. And I sort of based that on, well, here's what I would do with a coaching client, and here's what I think we can accomplish. But I didn't have there wasn't a big intake process up front. You know, I'd had the conversations a year earlier, and then a couple of conversations when they kind of called back rather desperate. And then I got hired. So, and we set a date for training a couple of months out. So the thing I did know to do was to set up conversations, like 1 hour conversations with each person on this 10-person leadership team. So myself and my client, who was my colleague on this project, she and I set these conversations up with them and learned a lot. Like what we were really trying to do through those intake conversations was really understand how they saw the situation. Like, so we were told by the HR person that that communication was terrible and they were having a hard time getting along and they didn't trust each other. Like those were the things that they were really grappling with. So we had somewhat of a feel, but we wanted to really understand from the people on the team, like, where did they think all that was coming from? Like, why was all that an issue? We were trying to really see how each person saw it so that then we would know how to go in with the intervention that we were doing. So the thing that became really clear quickly was that I'm trying to decide how to say this exactly, but that one of the leaders on the team just didn't see his own contribution to the problem. Okay. And that was a surprise to me. Like, I was really surprised because it looked like that person came to me kind of understanding. And what I saw pretty quickly is that there was maybe a really limited level of understanding. Okay. So I want to share a lesson learned at this point, because I think this is the best time to do it. So if I were to work with any other team again, like, I would do enough intake prior to getting hired, maybe with the entire team even. Like, I would say I might even do that prior to getting hired, to figure out if there needed to be some individual coaching done prior to the retreat, prior to the group work. Okay, that's something I didn't have the opportunity to do, and I see now, and I saw at the time with Cheryl's help, that that might have been a place that we really tripped. You know, that because we had a couple of people on the team who really, like they just didn't have a level of understanding of what was going on, and it would have been nice to be able to get them ahead of the learning curve, so to speak, because they were really influential people on the team. And so that's something I would just say, that even prior to getting hired, I would do a lot more intake the next time. And I would so that I could structure any proposal to have not only the group work being done, but also any individual coaching that I felt would be beneficial.
Yep. And certainly that's a lesson learned from one of my biggest failures, when I worked with a leader and I really thought based on my, phone calls with her and my meetings with her, I really thought that she was very hip to this because she was very new agey and she was very interested in kind of self-help books and things. And what I realized as soon as I did intake with the rest of her team was that she was the problem, and that I had already planned out a 2-day training program that didn't address the fact that she was the problem, and that before I did that, I should have done some individual coaching work with her. But I kind of got lulled into this false sense of security because she seemed so open and she was really interested in the principles and she read Michael Neal's book, and I really thought, great, this is going to be perfect. And then I start to talk to her people and I find out she's a very weak leader. This new agey stuff that she talks about is not well received. And it really bombed. I mean, I got 2 days of training out of it that didn't go very well, and there was no follow-up. So that was a big lesson learned for me of, really do that homework up front.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely do that differently. I could have made it a lot easier on myself as the trainer by doing that. But it actually ended up turning out okay. So one of the fears that I had prior to going in was, and I have this fear kind of just being honest, almost every time I do an intensive with a client, right? And it's this fear about like, oh my gosh, what if we get to the end of day one and we still have a couple of days left and I've run out of material? Like that's just like I always sort of have that fear, but it seemed, and when I do individual intensives, like that's never happened. So I can sort of put that thinking aside and it doesn't really do anything to me. But I think for whatever reason, I thought about this group in a different way. And that was one of the things I kept talking to Cheryl about, like, well, what if we completely run out of things to do or say? Like, what do I do then? And so one of the things Cheryl had me do as a homework assignment was to take the objectives of the client. And again, just those were around decision making, like actually making decisions and sticking to them, having a better level of communication and better quality communication, increase the level of trust. And there was one more thing. It was around just repairing some of the fractures in the culture. So some really
notice that, and we kind of gloss over that, Kim, because it makes total sense to us. You need to have objectives, like real, honest to God business objectives that are spelled out in business terms, that talk about things in the language that they're used to, because that's how they're going to measure the success. They don't care about the 3 principles. They've never heard of Sydney Banks. They don't care about that stuff. They have business problems that they want to address. And so that's a key point of having those objectives and always pointing back to those. And Kim did that beautifully.
Yeah. And that's something, whether you're talking about coaching a business client one-on-one or you're working with a leadership team, like that's a place to me that where it does make sense to have some learning outside the principles. Like sometimes I think there's a kind of a popular idea within the principles that like we only need the principles, but this is a place that I would respectfully disagree and say that if we're going to go into a business context, objectives are really important. And that's that's a business principle, right? Like that's something very important. So I looked at the objectives, just like I would do with a business coaching client, and said, okay, if I want to get them there to those objectives, if you want to do that, and they're here, knowing that the principles is probably the strongest thing I have in my toolbox for those particular objectives, then how do we build that bridge? And so Cheryl just had me take a stab at, like, what does the 2-day training look like? If you could break it down into morning and afternoon each day, like what's going to build, like, how are you going to build the foundation of the bridge? And then how are you going to fill in, take a crack at that. So she had me do that as homework. And that was a great exercise, because I sort of went into the exercise going, well, I'm not really sure, to getting through the exercise going like, oh, I do know what to do. I have a lot of ideas about what we could do. And so that was an amazing exercise. Do you want to add anything to that before then talking about how I ended up using the outline and the training? Do you want to say anything more about?
I think the other thing that Kim did a really good job with, that I do as well, is that, sort of sitting back and thinking that these people know nothing about the principles, and they're in a setting where they're used to learning a certain way, that they're used to learning by content, by information, and by content. And so people have a lot of habits, and there's nothing wrong with learning content. You have to know it. But this isn't content learning. And so there's a good part of the initial bridge building that has to do with just setting the stage for the fact that this isn't content learning, that this is going to be about getting you to a mental space where you can have some new ideas, some realizations about how things work. And there's sort of a slow roll up to, talking about how the mind works and the principles. But it's kind of a slow bridge so that people don't get nervous about what they're expected to do and how they're expected to act. Because we take it for granted. How many programs have we sat through? But remember that first program where you were worried about taking notes and this didn't sound like anything you'd heard before. And then imagine if your boss was in the room and you were supposed to be dealing with some really big business problems, and you're kind of wondering what the heck is going on here. So really telling people, this is how this is going to work and this is what we're going to do was key in her outline.
Well, and Cheryl, this might be a good place to me. Again, one of the invaluable things that you brought to the table was just even how you sort of set up a training. Like, and I don't know, like if you would want to share that on here, but Cheryl shared with us, including what she just said, like 4 or 5 things that she's going to go through at the beginning of any sort of group work that what it had the effect of doing was really taking a lot of things off people's minds. Yeah. And do you want to go through that quickly with her? I think that could be so useful.
God, I'm trying to think of what they are. So first of all, sort of talking to people about the difference between the content learning that they're used to and having a realization and seeing something new, and just giving them a couple of simple examples, like how they learned to ride a bike, or how they had new thinking about something, and that it didn't come from amassing a lot of facts and notes, or grinding away at what they knew, and that the way that they were going to get the most out of this program would be to just relax and sort of suspend what they know and look to hear something different, because this is going to be something different. And it's like, don't try to jam it into the hole of how you usually learn. Also letting people know that there's not going to be a whole heck of a lot for them to do, and so they're going to get antsy. And that I'll be giving them a lot, just talking about the logistics, I'll be giving you a lot of breaks. Also, I spend some time talking about the fact that what they see that's new for themselves in this 2 days is going to be their takeaway. And that there's nothing that will make up for them not being really present and focused and here in the moment. And it's interesting how, if you set the stage for the value of being really present and focused in the moment and looking to hear something new, if you set the stage for that, you don't have to tell people to put away their laptops or their phones. They will automatically realize that, okay, this is different. I'm not going to be able to half listen. and kind of pick this up. I need to be focused and really present and paying attention because this is different. And so just sort of, letting them know that. Letting them know that there's not a bunch of content that they have to take notes on, and that, there are plenty of books and videos and things that I can give them that can reinforce what we talk about. But that, so they don't have to worry that if they don't take copious notes, they're going to miss out on something. So I just kind of set that stage of, this is what this is. It's a different kind of learning, and take a lot of stuff off the table so they're not thinking about what are we going to do here.
Yeah, that was so helpful when you shared that with us, and really to set up any sort of group work. I mean, it just makes sense because, again, if we don't get people ready for this kind of a conversation or this different type of learning that they're going to do, chances are at least some of them are going to sit there and go like, what are we doing? Like, what is this? When are they going to get started? Like, they can have a lot on their mind just because we haven't prepped them,
Yeah. We used to have people at BAE who would say, like, halfway through the first morning, they'd say, well, when are we going to get started? Like, where are the overheads? Where are the handouts? And they'd be just waiting, like, well, we started, And so I found that I use overheads. I put them up there because I want them to see something familiar. If they're used to overheads with business objectives, I'm going to give them overheads with business objectives, so they'll start to settle down and be like, okay, I get this. I'm kind of on board here.
Yeah. So then in terms of kind of getting the team ready, so we did intake, and then in looking at sort of their different concerns that they had and speaking to them, I thought we had time, so I thought it would be a good idea if we could start orienting people towards the material by reading a book. And they were all very open to reading. They all but one person really wanted to do this intensive. Like, they were really excited for things to change. So we assigned them the book by Chantal Burns, Instant Motivation. And we chose that, again, it was based on sort of the feel of the conversations that I had with them, but also that it, sorry, my dog's acting up here, but
don't worry about her.
she's wanting to get at my housekeeper. But we just felt like some of the situations described in the book were really similar. She'll stop in just a minute. Really similar to what was going on in the office. So we did that. And one of the first activities we did after I kind of went through what we were going to do, and you just be quiet, please. Just being terrible. Is one of the first exercises we designed was for them to go through, break into small groups, and talk about the book and what their insights were from the book. So that's one of the first things we did when we were on retreat together. And it was really interesting because I want to share this little piece because I had just an interesting thing that happened during that. So we were in Louisiana, and we were on this beautiful historic home and gardens. It was just the retreat space was fantastic, really relaxing, and we got the stellar weather the days that we were there. And so several of the groups went out onto the lawn and gardens to do their discussion. And one group stayed in the training room with me and my colleague. And I was sort of busying myself with, getting ready for the next little segment. And what happened was that the group that stayed in the room, I happened to catch part of their conversation out of one ear. And I heard them starting to say, well, I have really grave concerns about this book, and I started to listen to their conversation out of one ear, and they were just ripping the book to shreds. Like, they were like, well, we can see what they mean about thought in certain scenarios, but this is clearly not true all the time. Like, they really started to have this conversation, and I mean, my heart sunk. Like, we had not been there 2 hours yet. And I started to listen, and then I started feeling poorly, for 2 or 3 minutes. And then it hit me, right? Like that, like there were the principles at play, that it felt to me like it was their understanding or misunderstanding that was making me feel bad. It was something from the outside making me feel bad. And what I realized, like in a moment, like, oh wait, no, it's me doing that. Like it's me taking that in and taking it seriously. Now, unbeknownst to me, my colleague, she was hearing the same thing. And thank goodness we didn't compare notes in that moment. Like, because I think we really would have thought it was coming from the outside, but she sort of settled herself too. And we compared notes about it that night. But when they came back into the room, it was really interesting. It kind of set up this really big insight for me, which was when they started sharing what they'd gotten out of the book, they'd gotten a lot. It was great. But I could tell one of the members of the group that was in the room, like I was really keyed into him, and I could tell that he was really influential within the group. And like my sense was like, gosh, he's got something to say. And if he doesn't get to say it, he's out. Like I can't say how I knew that exactly, but I got that sense just how he was being within the group. And I thought, okay, so what am I going to do about that? And then all of a sudden I got this idea, because he kept talking about people's unproductive behavior. That was what he was trying to get across. And it was like, he was not going to sit still unless he got to say something about that. So in the moment, although I had my wonderful outline, right? Like I had my day, which I knew was Cheryl. Like she's like, you're going to have an outline and then you're going to toss it when you don't need it anymore. So 2 hours in, I tossed the outline. And I said, okay, group, here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you split into 2 teams and talk about what makes a productive team, like what behaviors make a productive team and what behaviors make an unproductive team. And I put him on the team with the unproductive, right? Because he wanted to say something about that. And so I don't know why I came up with that exercise. Like it just came to me. Like, again, that's the beautiful thing about just being present with the group. But what it did is that it had the group was cohesive from then on. He was influential and he got to kind of say his piece, and then from then on, he went from being probably the most contrary person in those first couple hours and going like, I don't buy this book and that sort of thing, to really changing and being on board. And that did something for the group. I mean, I think it did something for me as the trainer. Like it really, it was really magical the way it went down. Because I thought I'd always heard that we're going to get what we need when we need it. Like that, I hear that in the principals community a lot. I've certainly experienced that in coaching people, but it was very conceptual to me that would that really happen for me in a group? And gosh darn, it did, like within the first couple hours. And so that was a really beautiful thing about just being present with the group and being able to see, like I could have seen him as a problem, but when I was present enough to not need to label him as the problem or whatever, I got what I needed to really get him on board and get him in the room with everybody. And eventually he was able to really help other people too. So that was really cool.
The other thing that this is a great illustration of is that there's no formula for exercises. People are like, all right, well, how about some exercises and how about some things to do? It's like, when you're grounded and you know the group and you're connected and you have the objectives out there of what you want to do, it will occur to you to do certain things as exercises. And I mean, she didn't plan to do that exercise, but it just came to her and it ended up being really effective.
Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. It was so interesting. And even to that point right now, I'm wondering if people, before we sort of go on with talking, I'm wondering if anyone has any questions or comments. Is there anything that anyone would like us to speak to that we haven't gone there yet? Is there anything in the group?
If anyone does have any questions, you could do the raise hand button, or you're welcome to I think you can all unmute yourselves. Sometimes that can be fine.
Any?
Not seeing.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. Okay,
I
just
say
wanted
keep going.
We certainly have plenty to talk about. Good call, Kim, to check in with folks.
yeah, I was just okay, thanks. Martin just sent a note. So great. So I would like to just keep speaking a little bit. So Cheryl had told me, and again, I know you guys maybe have heard this from other people, is that like plan some, but then the moment the plan doesn't look like something you want to use, toss it. And I didn't completely toss the plan, but to one of my fears that I was so afraid that I wouldn't have enough to talk about, what I ended up doing, so in the end, I ended up having, we got through over the 2 days, basically what I had planned for the first morning. So, I mean, just to be like, I kept keeping track of it. And I'm like, wait, we're only through break one. Like what's going on? But what I saw in the moment was that as they were sort of understanding, I just kept going for a deeper understanding of what they already saw. And like, instead of, and this was a great learning, even for my coaching, that I think maybe in coaching, I tend to push people along to the next point, maybe too fast, and deepening the points that they really did see, deepening the thought feeling connection, for instance, was one thing. I taught from the paradigmatic teaching because it looked like that was the way in for me. So I did that. So really talking to them about the connection between thought and feeling was really huge. And we just kept going deeper on that as much as we could, and instead of sort of maybe going to the next point or whatever it is that I thought I might want to teach. So that's one thing I definitely wanted to say on that. And then I couldn't say too much, like, and Cheryl really helped me with this, was that like getting them to really appreciate what they were learning. So like what that looked like in the room was, before we went to lunch, we'd just go around the table and we'd make a list of sort of what stood out for people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so then they could appreciate what they had learned, and then they could really kind of sort of chew on what other people had heard and learned. And we did that. We did that again at the end of the first day as well. And that was really a great place to land. That was a really good place to sort of go in for the night.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that we do up front that I didn't emphasize was that, I talk about it at least, and I know Kim did too, that this isn't something new that you're learning to do. The whole point of this is for you to become more aware of how your mind is already working so that you can optimize the way it works by having a greater understanding, and that it's not something new that they're learning. And I, over the years, have become much more confident in how quickly they're going to connect the dots for themselves and start to see things. That it's interesting because I think early on, in the very early days, I think we taught the principles like they were so mysterious and so special, and so people really didn't know what to expect. Whereas I lay this out really simply and matter-of-factly, and I help people to start to connect the dots right away so that they can start to see that, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is how I see that my mind works this way sometimes, and then other times I don't see it, but it's always working the same way. Sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't. That's just the deal. Sometimes we all see how it works, and sometimes we don't. We get caught up. And so I spend a lot more time asking them to share, whether it's in pairs or small groups or a go around, depends on how the group is, the feel of the group. Get them to share what they're seeing as well as what they're not seeing. Like what I love it when people are struggling, or when somebody gets frustrated, or because that's a great teaching moment. So I'm looking for that too. As I want people to be vocal and to tell me what's making sense and what they're struggling with, because that's how everybody can just keep learning together.
Yeah, that part about it not being special that's something to me, Cheryl, uniquely that you brought, or that I heard from you. Like maybe other people said it, but I couldn't hear it before that. And that really does something for us as the coaches or trainers, first of all, because like if we have this as something special or something only certain people get, or however you want to say that, like if we even have that thinking, like that makes our job a lot harder, right? Oh, I gotta teach them this special thing that's kind of tricky, and like that just, gosh, that it just sounds so much harder. And I love that point that you drove home, that really this is ordinary. Having insight is ordinary. We're already having it, whether you understand the principles or you don't, right? Thought is already creating feeling the same way, whether we understand it or we don't. And what we're really pointing people to is something that's very ordinary and very common. And we're just paying extra attention to it, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're just shining a spotlight on it. This isn't something new. And that just, again, that really, for me as a trainer, as a coach, that had the effect of making my job a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe prior to talking to Cheryl, I did have it as kind of special, and you get it or you don't, or what, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll share also this is a lesson learned, and I want to hold on to this one a little bit loosely. Like I don't know if this is an absolute or not, but one of the ways that the way I structured what we did on the second day is that I had the idea that we really, overall for the whole training, we wanted to spend probably 75 or 80% of the time on generally understanding how thought and feeling work, how we get creative ideas, like really stick to the principles 75 to 80% of the time. And then I knew at some point we wanted to go into their objectives, and we would want to do some special learning or special exercises pointed towards that. And I thought, so the way I sort of had that worked out was we'd spend about the first day and a half on raising our level of understanding. And then with that new understanding, we go into trying to see what objectives we still needed to work on. Like some would get taken care of by the understanding, but some they may still want to work on. And so the second day in the afternoon, that's what we did. And that's something I probably would do a little bit differently, because, and again, I'm holding this loosely. I'm not 100% sure that I would do it differently, but I think I would. And here's why. It's that the moment we sort of started to work on the objectives, everybody got up into their heads. like the feeling in the room was killed. Like people reverted. They started arguing at the table. And what it did do was it gave me the opportunity to model what might happen if that happens in their real meeting. So I called this big timeout and sort of pointed out to them what was going on. But at the end of the second day, like if I'm honest, like we had such a beautiful feeling at the end of the first day. Like I really wanted to end there. And at the end of the second day, people had still learned a lot, but they got up into their heads, and we didn't walk away with, to me, I thought, oh gosh, I hope it didn't ruin the whole thing. Like that's kind of how I walked away as a trainer. Like, oh, I hope that worked. Now, the thing that did happen, so to summarize that, I would probably end back on the understanding of some sort, like really end on the principles teaching and get back there. Like I think that would be just a better way to do it. All that said, when I talked to them 2 or 3 weeks later, because we have a series of follow-up calls, I did one a couple weeks ago, and then we're doing another one actually tomorrow. It was amazing to me what set in and what they had learned that we didn't even talk about in class. you know, what really happened, what I got to see, again, it took it from concept to like, oh, now I have some experience with this, was that the principals really did some work for them. Like they kept seeing more and more. They came back and talked to me about how when they do these big group meetings, they're in a creative field, so a lot of that involves like critiques. Where prior to our retreat, it was just kind of a free for all, and no one ever listened. That they were actually really taking in what people would say in their critiques. And the thing that was really funny about it is that only 10 of the people in the firm came to the retreat, but they noticed a real increase in listening and openness to other people's perspectives across the board. Right? So somehow, like that really, it really does work, right? I know I saw that in my one-on-one clients, but I hadn't had the experience of it so much in a group, and I got to see that expand. That's just one example. But they really came back and reported that there was a lot that changed, like just their level of stress and just some different things that we didn't necessarily hit on in the retreat, kept expanding for them. And that was just really, again, I've seen that happen in coaching. I've heard that happens in working with some groups, but I just hadn't had that experience yet. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, a point that Kim brought out in that some people don't often realize is that just because a leadership team starts to learn the principles and starts to raise their level of understanding and awareness, that has a ripple effect on everybody that they touch, whether they actually talk about it or not. That when the leaders of an organization start listening better and start being more present and start critiquing and asking questions from a different mental space, people notice that and they get the effect of that. So that meetings will often start to go differently, even if everyone in the meeting doesn't know the principles. And one person in a meeting who is hip to the fact that when people get up in their heads in a meeting that they stop being effective, one person can sort of call a timeout and say, oh, you know, we're really off track here. You know, we kind of went down a rat hole, and why don't we take 10 and come back? Like, it just takes one person to be more savvy about that, to start to make a difference. The group that I worked with initially at BA Systems, there were 13 people on the leadership team, and they did 2 weekend retreats. And they had a VPGM who really wanted to measure progress. So they did quarterly climate surveys. And after those 2 retreats, the quarterly climate surveys started to go up, like exponentially. And the only people who had been trained were those 13 leaders. Eventually, we trained the supervisors, and then we started to do open enrollment programs. But just the leadership team having more presence, more clarity, asking better questions, connecting better, it started to make a difference, you know, across the board. That was noticeable and measurable in a climate survey that we did. So sometimes people think that people have a lot of misconceptions, like, well, if I can't train everybody, you know, what's going to happen? Also, Kim negotiated 2 days. That was what she had. When we came into this, she had 2 days. Now, people say, you know, get as much time as you can, but sometimes all you can get is 2 days. And so you just have to be really clear with the group. We have 2 days. This is what we want to accomplish. Here's how we're going to go about it. And so you set the standards for, for what you're going to accomplish in the time that you have. And I've, you sort of start to get a feel for, well, what's the smallest amount of time that I could work with a group, and better, what could they expect to go away with in that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about negotiating those priorities and setting those expectations with the team. If I have a customer who comes to me and says, well, we really want to just do a series of 2-hour lunch and learns, and we need to have a major cultural overhaul. Well, I'm going to tell them that I'm sorry, but that's not going to work.
Right.
You're not going to overhaul a culture with 2-hour lunch and learns. Let me tell you what I could do in a series of 2-hour lunch and learns. Or, is it possible that I could get the leadership team for whatever? But it's like I know early on when I was negotiating with clients, I was terrible at setting those boundaries and saying, I was known for training. And so people came to me with a training mindset of, okay, we want a day of training and we wanted to do X, Y, Z. And I had to really go back to the drawing board and say, okay, let's talk first about what you want to get out of this. And then we'll talk about, the time that you have, and let's do some negotiating. Maybe there's pre-work that can make up for the fact that, all you have is a series of half days. Maybe there's some kind of post-work that we could do with webinars or some one-on-one coaching for people. But until you have the confidence to have that dialogue, trust me, you're setting yourself up for these misaligned expectations and not being successful.
Yeah, that is a great point. And that just reminded me of something that after you and I talked, Cheryl, and as we worked our way through this assignment, it actually had me take another proposal that I'd written for another company off the table entirely. And
wow.
Yeah, and I don't think I ever shared that with you, but they wanted me to come in for half a day to do the same type of thing of like really realigning the culture. And so I don't know, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I had written this proposal and I ended up just letting them know like that this is just that's not gonna work. Like I've kind of reconsidered this, and for what you really want, it's a bigger assignment. It would take more time, and like it doesn't make sense for you to spend this money because you're not going to get what you need. So that was a great experience, great learning to have as well, to just be able to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the end of the world. I'm still talking to them about some other things. So
that's right. Yeah.
We just always want to give ourselves the time to, like, it's not about us. We want to make sure that we're giving ourselves the time to give them what they want. Mm-hmm. And if we don't do that, if we sort of bend to their budget or their time constraints or whatever, like we're not really helping them. Mm-hmm. If we don't think we can do it. So you sort of, what Cheryl's talking about is being the ultimate service of the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a couple of comments or questions at this point. Well, along the lines of what you were just talking about, just a comment that, clients in general, no matter what your business is, they don't know what they don't know. So, I think some people are afraid when trying to woo a client, the client says, I need this, this, and this. And it's so easy to be like, okay, I can do this. And I mean, for any business, it's just that you're supposed to be the expert. You know what a client needs. And so, you should be saying, if you know that that's not going to work, or that's not what will be most helpful to them, it's your duty as the expert to, let them know what it is they really need. But I know that it seems like a lot of people get nervous about doing that, which I would say don't.
or to ask them enough questions, to ask them the right questions so that they can start to shape and understand better what it is they're really looking for.
Yeah, that's good too. But also along the lines, a question, just what you were just talking about, the 2 days or 1 day or whatever. And you don't have to give any numbers and or whatever, but I'm wondering how you determine how you're going to price these things. And that may be a whole other webinar.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about that. And then maybe we each give our take on that. Mine's not really very scientific. Like like, this isn't going to, like, people are going to probably roll their eyes at this answer, but really, like, I get a sense of it. Like, I just get a number in my head. I do that with my coaching too. Like, it just comes to me like, oh, it looks like about this much. And that's what I do. And then usually I do kind of run some back end numbers to see, like, you know, does this make sense? But sort of reverse engineer it, I guess. But it's like with the numbers, it's just a sense that I get. And I guess from where I'm getting that sense is I'm really looking at, I'm realizing this is part of my grounding. So I want to flesh it out a little bit more. So
good. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it just hit me like, why it's not just magic number. I'm getting a sense when I'm talking to the client about what value having some of these objectives met, like that there's a value in that to them. And whether they tell me how much the value is, or I can sort of intuit it, or I have a sense of it because I have a business background, like usually my pricing is somehow related to that. So it's I don't know that it's again a percentage of that or anything, because again, it kind of comes to me, but I think I'm usually maybe filtering it through what I know about business. And I happen to know this particular firm, I happen to know a fair amount about their business because of my old industry. And I had a feel for what value it might bring. Also, I'm always looking at too for myself, like I want to make the engagement financially juicy enough for me so I'm really invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't tend to do things, whether it's coaching or this sort of consulting, I don't do it quote unquote cheap, because I know I'm going to bring my better self to something that I financially feel like is lucrative to me. You know, I want to make sure that I'm invested in all ways, like from time, energy, money, and then I can really get behind the objectives they want to. Like I'm looking at that. Do I want this for them? You know, I've got to be invested in that way too. So that's sort of a little, I don't know. Does that make sense, Jill? Did that answer your?
Yeah, absolutely. And it confirms sort of the way that's how I've always priced things as well. I used to say I just pulled the numbers out of my ass, but basically it's what you say. You just know, you get a sense.
Yeah. So I'm like not the poster girl for this. I'm terrible at pricing my services. The only things that I'm really confident about in my pricing are, I know what other people bill me at. And so if I'm writing my own business, I'm like, well, great. If that's what they charge for me, that's what I'm going to charge for me too. And when I do my work with leadership teams, when I do things that are sort of spread across days, or I have kind of days in my head of how many days work it's going to be. And then I kind of have some figures in my head about, what a day of my time is worth. But I've really gotten away. Thank you, Jean, for telling me that I don't work at McDonald's, and so stop having an hourly rate. That I've really gotten away from that, except for some of the mentoring, some of the mentoring stuff that I do. I'll have a session rate that I do, but again, you get a sense of what people are willing to pay, and if you really listen to the business people when you're doing the intake. I have one client, and I know who they use as a competitor for some work that they do, and that consultant charges like 4 times as much as what I would usually charge. So I have no qualms about jacking up my rate a little bit, for this client, because I know that they're willing to pay a fair amount of money for this kind of service. And then again, I scale things down to there are local programs that I do for an honorarium, just because it feels right to do something for an honorarium. But yeah, it's there again. There's no formula. It's just really trusting your gut, and and for me, it's getting over the discomfort of somebody saying no. One of my one of the very first proposals I did was for a very combative leader, and she really just yelled at me about the proposal, and then of course I got really in my head about it, but I'm over that now. So
those are the ones you charge the PETA fee to.
Yeah.
I was just gonna. I mean, if you have more to share on that.
No, I'm done.
Another question I was curious about, probably to Kim, just wondering if you mentioned the 3 principles themselves to the clients, or if that doesn't even come up in this case, or.
Yeah, in this case, I didn't. It like, I don't have a rule about that, at all, but like, I would mention it, I suppose, if I think that sort of forwards the learning or helps people's curiosity or something, I think I probably would. But in this particular case, it was a group who probably, like, they're used to grappling with things intellectually, and I thought that's just going to give them one more thing to play with, the title, and so I didn't in this case.
It's in Chantal's book, so they read it. They definitely read the section in her book that talks specifically about the principles. So, and I mean, and for those of you who don't understand the paradigm, I mean, teaching from the single paradigm is teaching the principles, but you don't necessarily go into a big explanation of mind, thought, and consciousness. So, it's not like she was teaching something other than the principles.
Yeah. That's kind of what I figured. I was curious though, because to me it almost seems like it doesn't fit into a lot of conversations to even bring it up necessarily.
Right.
One other question was, and you may have talked about it at the beginning and I didn't pick up on it, but Cheryl, for you working with Kim, and did you also work virtually with the group too, or was it you were just working with Kim?
No, I just worked with Kim. It was great. It was so much fun. I just worked with Kim. We did a few 90-minute sessions, and she did work in between time, and then it worked out perfectly that the days that she was doing the offsite, I wasn't doing, face-to-face client work. I was traveling, I had a couple of meetings, but I was essentially available. And so I told her that if she wanted to check in with me, around noontime on the first day, I'd be available, at the end of the first day if she wanted to check in with me. And so she did call during the program.
That's right. We did have something, that was great, because we had something come up the second day. What was it? Oh, it was around, or maybe it was the first day. I can't remember which, but we had someone in the group. There was a personality conflict, for lack of a better term, between one person and a number of people in the group, and that there was one person in there who really wanted to air that in front of the whole group.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I was like, what was it? And so I really didn't know how to handle it. Like, I had a sense of possibly what to do, but it didn't feel quite right, And so I thought, but I can call Cheryl, because this is the great thing about having a mentor, right? That you can really pick up the phone. And so I called Cheryl, and thank goodness I did, because the way I was going to handle it, I see now, I was very up in my head about it. I was kind of a little bit scared about it, I guess. But anyway, she gave me a great suggestion of how to handle it, and then which was basically to not handle it within the group, to completely handle it offline. And I let the person who really wanted it to come out in the group, I was able to talk to him separately and say, we're going to handle this outside, just out of respect to everyone, including the person who's we're talking about. So it seemed obvious after Cheryl said it, but it was not obvious to me before. So I was very grateful for that.
Yeah. So that worked out. It worked out. I thought it worked out really well.
It did. I would highly recommend I want to give Cheryl a plug here, but just like having a mentor on this, like I said at the beginning, I could have found my way through it. But I know for a fact my my program wouldn't have been as effective without having Cheryl as a mentor in this. Like it just, we can't see what we can't see. And so having someone by my side, who really, not only had a really strong grounding in the principles, but also has the experience of what this can do for teams, like that just made so much difference. And it's not that you can't do it without a mentor. People probably do that all the time, and I'm sure it goes fine. But for me, like that, it was invaluable. Like just to have that, and I think just made a difference of how I showed up in the room, and the things I was able to work through with the group, and it was just I want to make sure that I get that point across, because that's just been fantastic. And honestly, if I was to, the next time I'm hired to do it, I would probably do the same thing. I would hire Cheryl again, just to keep taking my own work deeper, to keep honing my own craft, to keep getting better and better at what I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. Yeah, I was a little puzzled at how I was going to help people, because I had the great good fortune of, I learned to work with large groups of leaders, with the principals, because I wasn't alone. Not only was I not alone, but at any given time I had, Kasse, Sandy Kroc, Keith Blevins, Dick and Bettinger sitting with me, teaching the group. So I always had tons of support, like right in the room when I was learning. And I was trying to figure out, well, how can I do that? Because it's just not cost effective or time effective for me to be, duplicating that experience with other people. And I think we just, thanks to Zoom and the fact that Kim understands business, she did her homework, she has really solid grounding. This worked, the way that we did it. And so I was really happy that I was able to do this, and that it worked out without me, having to actually be in the room. It worked out great.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I suppose technically you could almost, if you wanted to do something like that with a partner but who couldn't be there, I mean, you could use Zoom and do a virtual, have a virtual speaker or a presenter. I would think they did that at the conference last week for one of the sessions. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right. I've seen that. I've certainly seen that work in programs where I've been on the faculty, teaching, having people who are live streaming, and having people co-facilitating together. I think that sometimes it can be a little distracting for people to have, a person who's there virtually and a person who's there in person. So, my preference would be to just do it the way I did it with Kim. I thought it worked really well.
Yeah.
I could see too, from Kim's point of view, just being worth it, just if nothing else, for taking the load off of your mind, so that your mind could be clear, because not to have that extra, like, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have I was going to just say, maybe we can check again now, see if anyone has
Yeah, I was interested in if anyone has a question, or if anyone's heard something today that's helpful or that's resonated. I'm just curious what's been helpful to people, or what people have heard.
Yeah.
Or questions, for sure.
Yeah, you can.
Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Paul,
How you doing? You all right?
Good. How about you?
You can hear me okay, that's fine, because I know my camera's not working for some reason. Kim, yeah, wonderful. You know what really strikes me as nice about how you've just described your experience, and that's just how you can use your grounding in such a way that it can guide you into the session, and how you have a structure which clearly came from your wisdom in the first place, but the structure was produced in the moment which it was produced. It didn't know about the actual event. So because the whole thing came from your wisdom, it's just really nice to be reassured that, like, everything's going to be fine during a session.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny that you're saying that, like I would go now into the next session, into my next assignment, and I have a few things kind of on the stove right now at different levels of development. Like I would go into the next one now with, with the benefit of having that under my belt, and that's why when Cheryl and I were talking about doing this, like that's giving other people some advantage. Like you haven't done it, but now you've sort of heard what it's like to go in and feel nervous about it or be worried about the content, and then okay, then it goes okay. So that it would do something for you guys too. So I'm glad you shared back that it has.
Fab. I have one question for you, Kim.
Yes.
If you're going to start opening people's minds up to the principles, what's your favorite opening, or not your favorite, but insightfully at the weekend, what was your kind of opening story or metaphor or question that you pose that gets people looking in the right direction?
Well, it's always like what I'm always calibrating for, to use one of Jamie's words, is I'm really looking for where they already see something, or where they're already curious, or where they're really up against something. Like I wouldn't ever think to start talking about the principles at all, or the understanding at all, just kind of out of the blue. Like what I think our best way in as coaches and trainers and facilitators is to meet them where they are, meet them where they're questioning something, meeting where they're curious, meeting them where they see something but they can't quite make sense of it as a principle, right? And so I'm trying to think back, Paul, to that particular. I don't remember exactly, because I was I was so present in the room with them that a lot of times I don't remember the exact examples that I use, but
that's perfect. That's just exactly as it should be. That's why I loved working with Kim, because that's exactly it. There's no, you need to see where people are and be really curious about what's making sense to them. What do they already see? What's puzzling to them? There's not going to be a pat story or example, or sometimes I have a decade of stories and examples, and there's always something new that's coming up with a group based on where my understanding is in the moment, which is always changing, and what's making sense to them and what they're seeing. So yeah, I know it's hard for people. People will say, well, what are examples of exercises or stories or things that you use or ways that you introduce the principles? And more often than not, exactly what Kim says is true. I can't even remember, because I'm so in the moment and so connected with them. I'm just doing what makes sense for them.
That's a wonderful answer, both of you. And it's a wonderful answer because I have experienced that myself as well. I actually I have a university who I'm hoping to start some work with soon, and they've just gone through a large structural change, and they have a lot of work to do. But on the surface, it seems like the problem is it's the logistics, it's the system, it's where we're sat, it's very surface level things, and I kind of got this sense from the department that that's what they on a surface level were pointing at, but I know that there's something much deeper going on. And sitting with them individually, one at a time, just being present and being grounded, there was no, now that I think of it, there was no particular story or introduction or anything. It's just kind of holding that space and that knowing that there is something there, that once they see it, then their eyes will be opened, like with Jamie's FedEx logo with the arrow. And holding that space is really, really valuable. And when I actually asked that question, Kim, I had removed the fact that at the time of doing a session, you will have done intake. So you'll have picked up things all along the way. And when you're present, when you're connected, you'll be looking at a group of people who you've all spoken to before. Yeah. You'll know where they're seeing it. You'll know where their misunderstandings are. And you could, if you know someone who's quite confident, you could, maybe say, what are you seeing? Have you read the book? What do you think? So, yeah, that's it's nice to be reminded that everything's going to be okay. Trust the moment and really follow your wisdom.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Good. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's been really nice hearing you all talk about this. So thanks.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Paul. We have Debbie has a comment or question. I will unmute her. Go ahead, Debbie.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you, Kim.
Hello.
And nice to meet you, Cheryl.
Nice to meet you.
And thank you for having me. I was just getting ready to get off here in 10 minutes, but this is really, I've loved this, and I'm very new at the whole corporate type of thing. And what's really funny is that a company got a hold of me through my website, through Yelp, whatever, and asked me to do a wellness fair. And it's a pretty good sized company with 800 employees. And, I just said, yes, why not? And what they were wanting from the HR department was somebody that did stress management. And that was one of the things on my website. So I did do this, and it's been about 2 weeks since I've done it. And I just thought, I'm just going to show up and have fun and talk to the employees. And it went for 2 days. So I got a hotel and just had a good time. So what I found from that is I met several people to do what I'm finding myself loving to do, is doing women retreats.
Oh.
And I didn't even really think, I was a little nervous about, okay, so what do I have to offer these people, because I don't do businesses. But being in the moment with people that came by my booth and talking to them about what Organic Insight is. And I have 3 people from HR that signed a book with numbers and contacts, and a couple of people on different teams, because this particular company runs 24 hours a day and 12-hour shifts. So it was really interesting. I got to talk to employees and their needs, and then people that were in either safety or whatever, different areas. So I've had a lot of interest in people that signed up, and then I thought, I just want to close it because I didn't even want to go there, because I'm thinking, do I really want this? So I'm a little nervous about that, and this is great knowing that Cheryl, that you're there to speak to, and Kim, who I love you. We went to Super Coach 2014 together.
That's awesome that you've got that interest going, Debbie, though. That's fabulous.
Well, thank you. I think I don't see myself having as much of an interest in it yet that it had in me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit, I don't know. I'm being honest.
Yeah, and I think what you're speaking to a little bit, and like, again, this is something we don't want to tie too tight. It's not truth with a capital T, but I just have noticed for myself that kind of anything new that I do or that I'm asked to do for my business, like I pretty much every time want to scrap the whole thing prior to doing it. Like I know well enough that I'm going to have that thinking, like it's just going to come along. And see, I used to relate to that prior to the principles as though like that was really telling me something. And so I scrapped a whole lot of stuff. But I'm so much less apt to do that now because I just have seen it like, oh yeah, that thinking kind of comes along anytime I dip my toe in something new. But really probably 95 times out of 100, I'm so glad that I go ahead and do it afterwards. A few times I could, really overwhelmingly so, I'm glad that I've had that experience, or I'm glad that I've tried something new, and it tends to open other doors. And so, yeah.
And I think one of the things that I had in mind, because is doing, there's something about two people together doing, I think the power of two people together talking, and some of the talks that I've done, there's been somebody there that kind of knew a little bit. So there was a part of me of wanting to, if I wanted to do this, do I want to do it by myself? Or am I, how would I do this? So I'm still in that stage of kind of looking in that direction, because I've not done anything with businesses before.
That's a good, I didn't talk much about my colleague that I worked with during this, so, but I will say a little bit about that. I did have someone on my team, which was fantastic. And I was a little bit worried, honestly, going into it, because she's done an intensive with me, but the coaching we did was pre-principal. So she hasn't had a lot of principals coaching, but we did do an intensive. And then she went to an event with me in New York last year that Aaron and Mara did. But that's kind of been it. So I was thinking, well, I just really said, we're going to stick to this and try to stick to it. Like, that was basically what I said to her. But it was amazing. And I told this back to Cheryl, was like, her grounding was surprisingly deep, and she really stuck to what we were doing. And it was a pleasure. It was wonderful having another person in there. So like, I would highly recommend that. Like I think Cheryl, you said that too before, like just having another person and sort of what that does for us.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's great. If you can have another person, and it's interesting. Early on, I was so focused on the money, and I was so nervous about making money. I never would have thought to say, well, let's split the fee, and I'll bring in another person to do it with me for the same fee for a learning experience. I never would have thought to do that. And I think if I had it to do over again, I would have been more successful with some of my early gigs if I had done that. I mean, just because there's something about two eyes on the group, and even if one person is more junior and two eyes on the group, a person you can pull into a cubby hole on a break and say, what the hell's going on in there? Somebody to do some eye rolling with you or laughing or whatever. It is.
Yeah, I think there's an energy. I've done a couple of talks with somebody in the 3P, and there's just this energy that you play off of each other that just everybody can feel it in the room. So, well, thank you, and I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful! Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you, Jill.
It's been about an hour and a half here. I don't know if other people have more questions, if you guys want to entertain any more of them, or if you want to end it here. I think it's a good time to end it.
And you can follow up. You can feel free to follow up with either one of us. Shoot us an email. Jill, thank you so much for hosting this and getting the word out. It's just I really appreciate it. It's great.
No problem. It's my pleasure, and I get to hear all these great talks this way. So
yes, thank you for hosting us. That was great.
And I will be making. It looks like so far it's recording okay, so we should be able to save the recording. Crossing fingers, knocking wood, that it works for people who missed it. And there's a couple people who are saying what a. Thank you from Claudia for sharing to Kim for sharing your experience. It's very helpful. And Jen, thanks so much. It was great to hear the practical stuff.
Oh, good.
Bonnie, thank you, ladies. It's been fab. From Jeff, thank you. Jill, this has been great. I love you, of course, Jeff.
I love Jeff too.
Thomas, thank you so much. And Leonard, thank you. So everyone's saying thank you.
Oh, thank you all so much.
You guys.
Appreciate it.
Seeing everybody.
Bye, everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye, Paul.
Bye,
Thank
Kim.
you.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye. Love you.
Bye,
Talk to you
everyone.
soon. Thanks.